We are now pleased to welcome Dr. Whitney Mason, Acting Deputy Director of DARPA and Director of the Microsystems Technology Office, for a fireside chat with SCSP's PJ Maykish on the future of high-performance computing.
Thank you. Good morning again, everyone. This is a real treat. We have Dr. Whitney Mason from the Microsystems Technology Office at DARPA, and just a few words about this office, just in case there's someone not acquainted with their work. DARPA, of course, begins when Sputnik happens, 1957, to prevent strategic surprise in the United States. Microsystems Technology Office has been responsible for everything like the key components in GPS, to the key components in some of your phones, and even key components in a Tesla, modern Tesla. So the guts, if you will, that run our best machines really comes from MTO. And so, Whitney, it's such a pleasure to have you here. Real honor. Thank you so much for making time to do this. And I would love for the crowd just to get to know you a little bit. And so just for starters, could you please tell like a little bit of a story about how you got passionate about compute, how you got caught up in it, just so we can learn a little bit more about you first.
Yeah, sure. So I admitted to PJ before I came out here that actually I hate computers. I have a technical education. I have a technical job. But I'm a complete Luddite. I don't have any apps on my phone. My son didn't get a cell phone until he was 16. I prefer to read books on paper. I hate computers. I acknowledge that they're extraordinarily powerful tool, but they're just a tool in my head. I'm an imaging scientist by profession, and so computers were something that were used to process the data. And when I started really getting excited about what computers can do is when we found that computers were able to pull things out of images that people couldn't find. In fact, the physics couldn't find. If you look at your phone on your smartphone, your camera on your smartphone right now, the silicon actually isn't as good as it appears to be at low light level. Physics doesn't actually allow you to see, but the cameras can, and it's all the computer. And so I think that it's magical when computers change from being able to do things that people can do just faster to be able to do things that people can't do. That's when it starts to get really interesting in my mind. And so that's when I started getting really excited and really starting to learn about what computers were and what computers could be.
Fantastic. It's going to be so fun to hear you talk about the future of compute, what you see, what you're working on. But before we go there, this session is called the Digital Cliff. And just in case there's someone that doesn't know all of the idiosyncrasies of all the limits that we're at right now and why we need what you're bringing, what is the cliff? What defines the cliff?
Yeah, so great question. So there's a few things. The most obvious is Moore's Law. Everybody has been talking for the last probably 10 years about the end of Moore's Law. Moore's Law is an empirical law that Gordon Moore came up with that says that the number of transistors per unit area doubles about every 2 years. When it first started, it was about every year. For a long stretch of time, it was every 2 years, and now it's getting to be closer to 3 and then 4, and we're going to asymptote to done very soon. And so the ability to get smaller and smaller transistors is coming to an end. As a corollary to that, of course, Moore's Law is also about economics. You can get more transistors for the same amount of money. So our performance was able to double every couple of years and get better and better and better for this roughly the same price. Right. And now that's coming to an end as well. Senator Warner talked about how great it is that we've onshored these foundries and that are state of the art. But there's probably only 1 or 2 generations after that. They're ridiculously expensive, and then it's going to be over. Right. And that's money and physics play against you. The last session, of course, talked about energy. Right? It's going to take all this energy to power the ecosystem. And while there are good solutions to that, we talk at DARPA a lot about the insatiable need for AI. once you have the capability to do some, you're just going to want to do more, right? And so the energy cost, I think, is something that worries us the most. And so as we come to the end of the energy curve, the money curve, the performance curve, right, we're gonna be done. And that's gonna enable everybody to catch up with this and be just as good as we are. And so one of the big things that we're talking about in MTO is how do we get off that road that we've been on for the last 75 years,
right.
And break away and think about doing something new and different. And because I hate computers, I was really hoping that it would be something besides computers that would create this next magical pathway. But I think we've convinced ourselves that we really need to do more along those lines because we live in an information age, right? And having that information is important.
It's so generally used, like a general purpose technology that's just not going to go away.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
It would be wonderful to think about what you look into at Microsystems Technology Office. You see your crystal ball. You see some of the best in breed, in our country about what they're developing. Some of them will be here with us on stage today, including the next panel. What do you think is the way out of the cliff? So what's the way to bridge over where we're going? And school us up on the future of compute through your eyes.
Yeah, great. So there's so many potential avenues, and that's what's scary and overwhelming and exciting at the same time. So the first thing, which I think is somewhat obvious, is superconducting, right? Right now we're in silicon CMOS. That's what all the foundries are based on. But moving to a superconducting ecosystem helps on many of those fronts. A superconductor, of course, is a material that has normal resistance at high temperature, but when you make it cold, very, very, very cold, it becomes superconducting and has no resistance. And so that means that information can flow along those wires without inducing power. You can make a Josephson junction. Yeah. It's the superconducting version of a transistor, right? Switches with no energy, right? So you've saved the energy problem. You can do lots of operations. But the cost is a problem, right? Because we don't have that ecosystem. I read a paper a week ago that talked about how we're torturing silicon in order to get out of it what we want. If we could move to a different ecosystem, right, that would change lots of things. And you can think of superconducting computing as just an analog to the computing we do now. But if you have that superconducting ecosystem, you can actually do a lot of what people are calling unconventional computing as well. I know there's going to be a quantum panel after this. That is, again, a kind of an obvious place to move, right? Yeah. And we in MTO were actually pretty cautiously excited about quantum. I have one of the most phenomenal quantum physicists that works for us. And 5 years ago, he would have told you that there was absolutely no way that we could have a quantum computer in the next 10 years. And now he's about 30% certain that we could have a quantum computer in the next 10 years. But he was at less than 1% 5 years ago. This is humongous.
We'll take 30.
Yeah, absolutely. So we are cautiously optimistic that maybe there might be a there in terms of quantum computing. And quantum computing also solves some of those problems. Yeah. Speed, right? A quantum computer allows you to do operations that would take hundreds, thousands of years in order to do in a matter of days or even hours. And so it could fundamentally change a lot of things like drug discovery, metal corrosion, nitrogen fixation. Nitrogen fixation is my favorite. Did you know that it takes 2% of the world's energy supply to create nitrogen for fertilizer? 2%.
Fascinating.
You know what the world does? It at zero, right? No energy, right? If we could figure out how this works, which we could do with a quantum computer, that could change so much for us.
I'm personally looking forward to trading with quantum computers, like a quant fund.
Oh, sure.
That's what I'm looking forward to.
Yeah, great. I want to participate in that too. But there's more things that you can do with supercomputing as well. And these are the things that we're really looking into in MTO and out there exploring. My current obsession is reversible computing.
Oh, great. Yeah.
Reversible computing is basically that, it takes energy to create a bit, but then it creates almost the same amount of energy to erase the bit. That's how your computer works. But in reversible computing, you just do the operation, and then you reverse it. And so theoretically, there's no energy, right? So you can have zero energy compute. I know there's somebody here that knows way more about it.
Later today.
Please come find me. I'm super excited about this. It changes the way we can think about things. There's stochastic and probabilistic computing. What might that look like? There's neuromorphic computing. I don't love neuromorphic computing. Actually, it's really cool from a physics perspective.
How so? What do you see there?
Yeah, so, right, I talked earlier about how what excites me about computers is they can do things that people can't. Like, why are we trying to model the brain?
Since we have one.
Yeah.
Got it.
But I don't know about my brain. Your brain, I know, is very, very good. And so why do we need
Always
another
a work in
one,
progress, right?
I think that we want computers to enable us to do things that we can't do.
Gotcha.
I cannot detect missiles. I cannot do super fast financial operations, right? There's a lot of things that I can't do. That's what I want computers to do. And so neuromorphic, models the brain and tries to behave the way the brain does. Let's think bigger and try to do more and create new capabilities as opposed to just doing what we can do faster. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes a ton of sense.
Yeah.
Fantastic. What a that's a good world.
Yeah.
I like the world you're creating.
Thanks.
The world you're creating, yeah.
Yeah, thanks.
With the time we have left, I think it would be such a privilege for the audience to hear a little bit of strategy and your thoughts on the future of advantage and leadership in the country. If we were to take you and just bring you up to the White House and just think at a national level, just moves the nation should make to make a really positive, a world where the United States leads in advanced compute. What are some of those moves that are obvious to you from just staring at your work? What should we do?
Yeah, that's a really hard question. That's a really hard question, right? So one of the things that I've been thinking a lot about, I just read this really great book. It's called The Entrepreneurial State. In this book, the author, she talks about about the importance of government-funded research and the collaboration with the community in order to actually change the world. Since we're sitting here, right, the transistor is the obvious place, right? Bell Labs, as you referenced earlier, created the transistor, and then the integrated circuit. And then the Department of Defense actually was the first mover in terms of making a significant investment in changing that ecosystem, right, such that it could then be commercially available and change the economic security of this country. Super excited. We invested in a university that spun out of a company called In Charge AI, doing in-memory compute, which removes the bottleneck of having to pass data from the logic to the memory, which slows things down. They put the logic and the memory right next to each other, right, so that they can do this at a lower power. They spun out this company. They just got $100 million in Series B funding. Yes. But they never would have been able to do this, right, without that initial risk-taking that the government is willing to do when they fund people to step, outside the edge. I don't think that the United States or even the world can afford to make an investment in every single thing that might work. And that's where government-funded research with brilliant people like there are at DARPA, present company excluded.
By no means.
Thank you. We did just meet. That can change things, and so one of the other things that we're really trying to do in MTO in particular is reach out to the community and tie us closer together with the commercial world, right? As we take these risks. To try to understand how we can coordinate and collaborate and take risk off the table for them for the things that we think will be really advanced and change the trajectory that we're on.
Fantastic.
One of the other things that I obsess about, and DARPA doesn't do this, but I do obsess about this, is workforce and education. If you read the studies, the United States is going to be somewhere between 100,000 and 1 million people short in the microelectronics world alone, right? So those are the people that are going to do the innovations, run the factory, do the designs, build the structure. And that's just microelectronics, right? That's not quantum and everything else.
Right.
So we need to figure out how to better include our educational system in order to make these people ready for this innovative future. And we do that by investing in universities and small businesses and even big businesses who have internship programs, right, to help people. But I worry very much about the workforce that is going to be able to move these innovations forward. The third thing we're trying to figure out is that ecosystem, that manufacturing ecosystem that I talked to you about earlier. I don't want to have to torture silicon in order to make these huge advancements, but it's really hard to say to people, let's step off a cliff, let's try out superconducting, which is not actually a big technical risk, it's a market risk, right? Am I actually going to get my money back for the significant investment I would have to make in a superconducting foundry? And so how can we think about, and that's actually what I think is exciting about this unconventional compute, is a lot of people, for example, could use a superconducting foundry. And so maybe we can create an ecosystem, a consortium, a group of people that say, right, we can all come together and provide the market, the use case in order to do these things. And the last thing, and this just ties into exactly what I just said, is sometimes as a scientist, you know, you start with, in the beginning, there was a Hamiltonian, and then you traverse up, you know, to nanometers, and then microns, and then millimeters, and then you retire, and the next person starts starts again. This is not the way physicists think, but start at the end, right? I very firmly believe that transformation starts when you create new things, not march along the same path that you're on. And so how can we think of the transformation that future compute and AI and networking can create? Envision that market, right? And then walk through the steps in order to build it. It's what we did with the transistor. The Gordon Moore and others that went off to stand up Intel, they knew that they wanted a computer, you know, at every desktop at the time where there were these. I'm old enough that I remember being a very small child and sitting in my aunt's lab and playing with the pieces of paper, you know, that the computer spit out from the mainframe. Right. People then would have said, why do I need a computer at my desk? And yet they knew what they wanted to do, and they moved the world in order to transform this.
Love it.
One of the next transformative things, right, that we can envision, and we can start moving those steps. I don't think we have 75 years this time, right? Right? We can't go from 1947 to 2024. We need to go from 2024 to 2034. That is what I actually think could change everything. And I'm hopeful that this unconventional computing can be a path on the way there.
Absolutely love that vision. Really inspiring.
Thank you.
Whitney, thank you so much. I mean, just before we close here, I thought we'd just turn to you for final remarks. Anything you want to say about DARPA? If you could cue the DARPA slide for us, that would be great. Whitney, over to you for final remarks.
Yeah, so at DARPA and in MTO in particular, I think it's the start of a revolution. And we would love for people to come be part of that revolution. Come tell me where I'm wrong and where I'm right, and be part of the ecosystem. So is it up?
Yep.
Oh, lovely. If you want to hear more about DARPA, we have DARPA Connect, and it can teach you all about the ways that DARPA works. And if you want to hear more about what I think, there's the Voices from DARPA podcast at the end.
Fantastic. Ladies and gentlemen, please thank Dr. Whitney Mason. Thank you so much.